Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about the advanced edge of artificial intelligence, which is deep learning. We'll talk about deep learning trends as well as the future of deep learning. To discuss that, I'm joined by someone who knows a lot about the topic. With me is Sri Ambati, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of H2O.ai. Sri, very happy to have you with us today.
Thank you for having us.
And you are actually in a hotel room at the moment, are you not? We're relying on hotel Wi-Fi, which I believe is going to work fine.
Yes. We're glad that the world has begun to reopen. Our models indicated that the Omicron would come fast, spread wildly, but also hopefully settle down. And so we're back on the road, meeting customers and creating the community. And today I'm in DC trying to build the community locally to re-engage and make AI forefront of their conversations and discussions.
Neat. Well, I want to look at the landscape for deep learning and talk about, how companies are approaching it. But I think it would be interesting to actually stop and define what it is, because I think a lot of people don't even know what artificial intelligence is really, much less deep learning. I mean, when I think about deep learning, I think about it's a software architecture with a layered approach to better mimic the human mind. But I don't want to go too far in that rabbit hole because you know a lot more about this than I do. Tell us, please, simply, what is deep learning?
Now, I think when people think about AI, and deep learning has become synonymous with AI these days. And the idea is that deep multi-layer neural networks, right, sort of that learn quickly from large amounts of data and that can continuously improve themselves. Right? So there's a gradient descent, which is a stepwise refinement that is at the heart of deep learning. But really, I mean, deep learning is recursively applying linear kind of methods, right? Linear algebra. So it's a matrix method. So that's quite intuitive. The weights, the training weights, how do you pass signal from the first layer that is taking away some portion of the learning to the next layer, and so on and so forth. The interesting thing about deep learning is it needed large amounts of compute and large amount of data. Where it became really strong, the turn of 2010, 2011, was we cracked the code on ImageNet, which is the ability to solve lots of image recognition problems. And that gave it a lot of maturity. And in the last 24 months, NLP, natural language processing, became also very much amenable to deep learning. Where it gets a lot of scrutiny is since it's deep layers of neural nets, it's a little opaque. People want to understand how it made the decision or why it thought of making a turn on the highway, or those are the kind of things that to understand why it scored someone as fraud or scored a particular transaction as good or giving underwriting. In all these places, deep learning is a little scrutinized because explaining neural networks is a very new topic. It's on the edge, but people are beginning to improve that aspect of deep learning as well.
Oh, neat. All right, so let's look at the landscape, the marketplace landscape for deep learning. I'm thinking that deep learning is generally pretty far ahead of where most companies are. I mean, where do you see the adoption rate for deep learning currently?
Yeah, most of our banking customers or customers in telcos like AT&T or Citibank or Capital One or Goldman Sachs, or even Reckitt Benckiser or someone like a UPS, these folks had a lot of data on transactional and time series data. So up until like 2018, 2019, that was the primary problem sets they were looking at in the business world, in the data center. But I mean, I tend to think of 2019 BC as before COVID, right? So right after COVID, the amount of Zoom videos, the amount of text, email, amount of data that has come in not traditional form but audio, video, podcasts, and NLP has spiraled, and in that sudden nonlinear jump in these forms of data means companies absolutely are looking for an easy way to use deep learning. Deep learning, some of the major frameworks in deep learning came from Silicon Valley. And I mean, the original deep learning method was actually Theano, came out of Toronto, but the actual more industry grade came from both PyTorch from Facebook and TensorFlow from Google. We wrote the deep learning for transactional data in H2O. But I think that the net of it is that the deep learning methodologies are only privy to the world's best talent. How do you tune these parameters of a deep neural network is something that was very hard to do. So that's kind of brings us to the topic of, is there an easy way to, a no-code way to do deep learning for enterprises?
I think the phrase "no code deep learning" almost feels like an oxymoron. I see, it seems like deep learning is so complex that if there could be a no code, low code way of doing deep learning, that'd be pretty amazing. Are you telling me that there is such a thing?
That's exactly what we built, Hydrogen Torch. And H2O is a grassroots movement which started as all data scientists, mathematicians, physicists, compiler engineers, systems engineers coming together to build the world's best AI cloud, right? That's what we started doing. But we also have, as part of that, the world's highest number of data science grandmasters. Think about
that's the Kaggle folks, right?
Yes, if you think about chess, there are about 1,200 chess grandmasters and 250 AI Kaggle grandmasters. And H2O is home to 10% of them, and many of them former number ones. And so these days, if you want to become number one in AI in Kaggle, is different from what it was 5-7 years ago, where you had to be good at time series prediction 5-7 years ago. These days, you need to be number one in image recognition, audio, video, location, and NLP. So what we did is took the new batch of incredible Kaggle grandmasters at H2O and asked them to kind of create a template, a way to templatize this like deep learning, no code for our customers. And it's a no code way of taking pre-built models, a lot of public pre-built models, but then training it on our customer specific corpus of data. That's where the transforming that is what we released as a product called Hydrogen Torch. It's our AI engine. It's our latest engine that has been released. And what we're seeing is incredible applications unlocked at even major enterprises. And they're not necessarily kind of having to acquire all the latest knowledge in deep learning frameworks.
So, all right. So the product is called Hydrogen Torch. It's actually a low code, no code, or low code, actually, low code deep learning platform. In other words, I could get on it myself. I'm not a software developer. I could create a deep learning application myself using this?
Yes. So an example, one of the major retailers came to us and said, can you predict fashion trends based on all the dresses people are wearing? Because 2 years, the fashion sense as the world has changed, more pajamas, right? Sort of more easy clothes. And so what is the new trend look like this summer? And then they have these all public images of famous stars and pictures of them and what they're wearing. And then retailers were coming into their new stores, and they're able to now take that big picture public data, but then also customize it, transform those pre-built models that came from that data to their specific stores, and then change and predict the future. We have another customer who's looking at, as a healthcare customer, looking at object identification in chest x-rays. Again, it used to be historically a difficult problem to get. It's very domain specific. And so we have the pre-built image models, but then fine tuning it in a very simple no code way. And it is actually no code, that you can actually click through and ask it to learn the new data, and it gets really good and highly accurate for the specific problem at hand.
Well, it seems like the difficult part of that is I could create my own deep learning application, and I could use the no-code platform. I could use Hydrogen Torch, log on, create the platform, create the application. It seems like the problem would be I would need a massive data store to feed that application, because that application isn't going to be worth much without a massive data store. That's the part that's difficult. Then, if you're going to make the front end easy, still the difficult is having the data and have it properly prepped. Am I correct in thinking that?
No, I think one of the ways the pre-built models capture a lot of this massive data, kind of learning from patterns from massive data, and transforming it to local corpus. Actually, the corpus doesn't have to be that large. So the traditional way of applying deep learning from the first principle, one would have to start with a massive amount of data that it can train on, all the images and all the NLP documents or summarization. One of the problems we're solving for a large news agencies, how do you summarize correctly a very large paragraph of news articles? And so you can actually start with the pre-built BERT models that are available for NLP. And so you take those models and then you fine tune them for the local corpus, and you transform, and now suddenly it becomes more applicable to the problem at hand. And so the big data needs are captured well in the pre-built models, and you can essentially use small data, but good labeled data is still going to be an important aspect of machine learning and deep learning.
Just so I'm clear on that, you're saying there is a pre-built model that would have either could capture data by itself or would have access to data. So even a small business owner, or medium-sized business owner, could actually use this and wouldn't need his or her own large data store. Is that
That's
correct?
Exactly right. That's exactly right.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. Could you give a couple more examples of how this is used by customers? It's a pretty interesting idea.
Yeah, I think some of the early customers are trying to bring NLP on entity recognition in documents, for example, or they want to start using NLP for CRM. A lot of customers have been leaving chat windows or CRM feedback, figuring out sentiment of that feedback, figuring out what they were really trying to say instead of in NLP. Then we have, when I say NLP, it's all natural language form of data coming at customers. Then we have image recognition problems. We're seeing a lot of applicability for video as well, audio transcription, speech to text translations, and we're beginning to kind of try to. Oftentimes, businesses are inundated with amount of data that is coming at them in terms of traffic. Like whether it's inside the video traffic inside their companies or on the public domains. How do you make sense of that? One problem we're solving for a very large beverage company is figuring out how many trucks of theirs are going around on the streets, because things have reopened, but traffic is just picking up. So you can't really use the traffic patterns of pre-2019. And so you need to kind of have to rebuild those models from scratch. And the advantage of that is you can fine tune deep learning to figure out how many trucks are going on. Traffic, one customer of ours has installed this in overseas, installed this to identify who's likely to get into an accident and prevent the accident before happening. Because sometimes when people are out partying, they want to get back home, so they don't take their a shared drive. They're driving by themselves. So we're using that to prevent accidents. Preventive maintenance is another use case. Engine failures, how much more reusable life, and so on and so forth.
That's super interesting. You've talked about H2O's mission as democratizing AI. So it's not available only to the elites. It's not available only to deep pocket organizations. It's available to a larger number of people, larger cohort. I mean, what do you see as the future of democratizing AI? I mean, where is that going in the years ahead? That's a pretty interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, when we think about democratizing AI, the first thing we wanted to do was give as much innovative freedom to our customers. So we started with open source, which is the most innovative freedom, right? But you're making it faster, cheaper, and easier. It's a democratization from a technology standpoint, is make it faster, cheaper, and easier for companies to embrace and use AI.
Mm-hmm.
But what we are now seeing with AI Cloud, with H2O.ai Cloud, is we're able to bring organization-wide transformation with AI. In other words, it's not just the best teams within those companies. Usually marketing is trying to figure out how to do customer acquisition very well, or and which ad right, to how to spend their monies for ads. They usually have sophisticated or regulatory in banks. You'd have the chief risk officers having the best AI or machine learning talent. But what we're trying to do is essentially get that across all the companies, and that's by creating consumption cycles for AI, which is applications. So a lot of the work we're spending now is how do you create these machine learning models and embed them into applications so that people can consume AI, and then they're using AI all the time, which is they're getting used to not just asking what happened, but what is likely to happen. What will be the gas price in 2 weeks or in 2 months? They're beginning to ask those questions, not just what was the gas price 2 weeks ago.
Right.
I think that that kind of asking those questions and then trusting the prediction enough, if the prediction is good relatively consistently, trusting it enough to feedback and change their other business decisions. So a lot of the democratization of AI efforts now are to get the customers to culturally attune themselves to be data-driven, to listen to what the model is saying, and get that agility inside the company and ability to build a trust, but also verification. If you can build good guardrails around AI, then people can use it more. You might have heard that brakes allow us to drive faster, right?
Right.
So then putting that explainability around validation frameworks to test the models. All models are wrong. Some models are useful. And so you need to constantly keep the models in check and trying to make sure they don't have blind spots like any other intelligence systems, and try to create an ensemble of them so that they can cover for those and test them adversarially for boundary conditions, like what if no one drives on the highway, or that's happened in COVID. COVID was a big like kind of way, everybody went digital, so everybody now wants to use AI, so there's increased adoption for AI. But I think now it also awoke us that we need to build models more consistently and continuously. Instead of underwriting someone for once every few years, you want to underwrite them almost all the time. So you can continue to learn that this particular person can buy something luxury, or is expecting a child, and so as a result, he's going to change homes, so on and so forth. I think that kind of continuously learning about and personalizing our offerings to our customers needs organization-wide transformation. So I think that's what we're seeing a lot more of. The democratization of AI, obviously, more people are making new frameworks in AI, and continuous. There's a global workforce. The number of data scientists is still small, so we've actually globalized that ability by reducing the complexity. We've gotten a lot more people to learn AI, use AI, and transform their organizations. So once you have these early success stories going everywhere, others are picking it up and deploying it into their businesses.
Shri, that is really fascinating stuff. I think you've said it. It's going to be an interesting sector to follow, no doubt. And I love the idea of democratizing AI. Certainly companies are hungry for that. Thank you so much for sharing your insight today.
Well, thanks for having us. The one thing I would want to mention that AI gets a lot of pushback on, can I trust this AI? Is it taking my job away? Right?
Ethics and job loss, yes.
I think what AI actually is doing is reducing the mundane things that machines can solve. So it elevates us to do things that only humans can care and humans can do, like compassion. During the time of war, humans can be compassionate. Empathy, again, during the time of incredibly difficult times for people working from home with their families, having that empathy for your customer, empathy for your employees, for your team members, and other ecosystem thinking, all of that can be done from the human side. And AI is a force for good. We've been using it to predict hurricanes, for example, or wildfire. We ran contests, crowdsourcing the contest of predicting wildfires, or AI to save endangered species or do census of endangered species with some of our partners like WildMe, or mapping the ocean sea floor to save whales with another partners like SeaTrack. But essentially, AI is a force for doing a lot more with just same amount of people or same amount of resources by using data more wisely. And that means you're optimizing the power of an individual human being so he can do even more. And that's kind of the grand vision for democratizing AI, is that if it's able to take away 98% of what otherwise would be needed to be done manually, then we can actually use that time to think grandly and become better humans.
That is optimistic vision of AI. I like that, and I want that to come true. Sri, thank you so much. It's been great. Very much appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you for having this.